Hey, let's dive right in. We're going to get into the fascinating world of brands, pulling from Debbie Millman's book, Brand Thinking and Other Noble Pursuits. She basically interviewed the smartest minds in the business, and we're going to unpack the powerful and often totally invisible forces that guide our choices every single day.
So, to kick things off, look at this number, 19 million. You know what that is? That's roughly the number of ways you can customize a drink at Starbucks. I mean, 19 million! If that doesn't just perfectly sum up the crazy, overwhelming world of choices we live in, I honestly don't know what does. We're practically swimming in options.
And that leads us to the big mystery we're going to try and solve today. With all that noise, with all those millions of choices screaming for our attention, how in the world do we actually decide? What's really going on in our heads when we reach for one brand over all the others?
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this in 5 parts. First, we'll talk about that feeling of being totally overwhelmed. Then, we'll get into what a brand really is. It's not what you think. After that, we'll explore the deep human connection, the brand's promise, and finally, how the brands we pick actually say a lot about who we are.
All right, first up, drowning in choices. That whole 19 million Starbucks drinks thing, it's not just a crazy statistic. It's something we all feel every day. And it turns out, brands are one of the main shortcuts our brains use to cut through all that noise without us even realizing it.
So if brands are our life rafts in the sea of choice, what are they really? This brings us to part 2. A brand is so much more than just a logo. To get this, we kind of have to forget everything we thought we knew about branding.
You know, we tend to think of a brand as the surface-level stuff, right? A cool logo, a catchy jingle, a funny commercial, but the experts in this book? Oh, they say it goes way, way deeper. It's not the logo itself, it's what that logo stands for. A promise, an experience you can count on, and maybe most importantly, a sense of belonging.
Marketing genius Seth Godin just nails it here. He basically says a brand is a shortcut. It's this little file folder in your brain where you keep all your expectations, your feelings, your memories about a company. The brand doesn't live on a billboard, it lives inside our heads.
And then, the absolute legend Wally Olins takes it to a whole other level. He says, branding taps into one of our most basic, fundamental human needs, the need to belong. We're tribal creatures at heart, and, brands have kind of become the symbols of our modern-day tribes.
And this is where we get to the real heart of it all. Section 3, the human connection. If brands are really about these deep feelings of belonging and trust, then how do they get such a powerful grip on our psychology?
Designer Brian Collins gives us this brilliant insight. He says the greatest brands aren't just selling you something, they're telling you a story. And not just any old story. They're tapping into these universal myths, these archetypes that are basically hardwired into all of us.
Let's make this real for a second. Think about Nike. They're not just selling sneakers, are they? They're selling the idea of victory. Apple isn't just selling you a laptop, they're selling the story of the rebel, the creative who thinks differently. And Dove, with their campaigns, they're not just selling soap, they're selling a powerful idea about real beauty. These mythic stories give products real meaning. And this is why a simple brand can be such a powerful unifier. I mean, in a world that feels more and more divided, this shared experience of something as simple as a Coca-Cola can actually create a moment of connection. It's a tiny piece of common ground that can cross cultures and borders. Okay, but once you realize just how much influence brands have, you have to ask a tougher question. And that brings us to Section 4, a brand's promise. With all that power, what's their responsibility to us? It really is that simple. If a brand is going to take up space in our culture, if it's going to tap into our deepest human needs, then it has a serious obligation to be worthy of our trust. Author Daniel Pink calls this the brand promise. He breaks it down perfectly. It's a deal with 2 parts. First, there's utility. That's the does it work part. But just as crucial is significance. That's the what does it mean part. A truly great brand has to deliver on both. No exceptions. And when that promise gets broken, wow, the fallout is huge. Just think about BP. They spent millions rebranding to Beyond Petroleum, making this big green promise. And then the Deepwater Horizon disaster happened. That promise was completely shattered. The result? A reputation in tatters, consumer trust completely gone, and, something a lot of people don't think about, it becomes incredibly hard to attract the best employees, which can cripple a company for years.
Which brings us to the magic word, authenticity.
Brand strategist Cheryl Swanson just hits the nail on the head with this. In today's world, you can't just buy authenticity or slap it on like a sticker. It has to be earned. It has to come from what you consistently do day in and day out.
And all of this leads us to our final stop, the brands we choose. We've been talking about these massive ideas, but let's bring it back home. What does all of this mean for you and me in our daily lives?
The management expert Tom Peters came up with this term, brand you. And his whole point is that every choice we make, from the coffee we buy to the car we drive, is sending a signal. We're all constantly curating our own personal brand, telling the world a story about what we value and who we are.
But maybe the most important idea in this whole discussion comes from Malcolm Gladwell. He argues our choices aren't just personal statements, they're votes. Every single dollar you spend is literally casting a vote for the kind of world you want to live in. So I'll just leave you with this one question. The next time you're about to buy something, anything, just pause for a second and ask yourself, what story does this choice tell? What kind of world am I voting for right now? Because the brands we choose don't just say something about us, they're actively building the world we all have to share.